All that is disconsolate is without you, a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction, written and narrated by Starthorn from Scratch, or Starthorn for Podfics. This is a transformative work. However, full credit goes to the original creators for the characters. Thank you. Chapter 1. Gel Pen Apology. It sort of started when Marinette got that apology letter in the mail, the one that she would end up rereading at least 8 times within the hour it was opened. No way it was real. She had to be dreaming, because it couldn't have been really happening. Maybe it was a prank, some kind of cruel joke. But it wasn't a prank, and it was real. She couldn't have been dreaming either, because her dreams were never like that. Even once she discerned this, she almost wished it wasn't true. Chloe Bourgeois sending a letter? To her? She was Marinette Dupenchang, Chloe's sworn enemy, a rival for reasons Marinette had never known. They were supposed to hate each other, and it was a handwritten letter too, in a fancy font with a professional signature. It even stated the words, "I'm sorry." What, had pigs begun to fly? But when Marinette arrived at school that next Monday morning, half expecting Chloe and Sabrina to be standing in the classroom ready to bully her for thinking it was real, Chloe stayed away from her. Not a single harsh word was spoken between them, and Marinette didn't even catch Chloe laughing at her behind her back. As they sat in the same classroom, just a few seats apart, Marinette stared a hole in the back of Chloe's head, trying to somehow telepathically contact her and yell at her to turn around, just so that they would make eye contact. Marinette wanted to scream at her. Not an upset scream, necessarily, but something asking for an explanation. Why in the world had she read the words, "I was wrong to treat you like I have, and I understand if you won't forgive me, but I do implore you to," in glittery golden gel pen at 9 a.m. on a Saturday? What the heck had gone down? And when school broke for lunch, Marinette actually witnessed Chloe tell Sabrina to get whatever she wanted because Chloe felt bad for forcing her to eat what she wanted for several years. What was this, a half-baked villain redemption arc? This isn't some sort of teenage rom-com, Chloe. What are you doing? Marinette wanted to scream at her. Plus, the fact that all the apologies felt genuine sort of made her skin crawl. No one else seemed to have caught on, though, so these observations made her feel a little crazy when she brought them up to Alia, who slowly blinked in response. "She's probably just going through one of those phases she has, you know?" Alia had finally said, chewing her bagel and brushing it all off far easier than Marinette could. "When she watches too many Ladybug Helping People compilations or something on YouTube and feels bad." Marinette had squirmed awkwardly in her chair, unable to explain the doubt she had at that response. "But it feels so real." "It always does, girl." Alia frowned down at her food, "and then she goes back to normal." She was probably right. She always was. Still, Marinette found herself rereading the letter when she got home. She found herself analyzing every word, scrutinizing whatever phrasing didn't feel right. Then she would read it again, and suddenly the previously criticized phrasing was fine, but something else was wrong. Her mom eventually asked her what she was reading so thoroughly, camped out at the kitchen counter as she was, but Marinette just laughed hollowly, shaking her head and responding with a quick "nothing," before folding the paper and slipping it into her pocket again. Man, did she want to confront Chloe about this. Initially she couldn't, because a part of her was still insisting that it had to be a prank, but her greedy, panicky curiosity still felt as though it was eating her inside out. She couldn't deny that, although she tried hard to keep it to herself. After about a week of Chloe treating her nicely, she couldn't stand it anymore. Although Alia somehow kept her from confronting Chloe in the middle of class, pulling out the letter and all, once school was over, Marinette found herself racing after her previously rival as she walked home from school. Alone, Marinette barely had time to recognize before Chloe turned around to find the source of the pounding footsteps. She was walking home alone. She never did that. Marinette skated to a halt in front of her, breathing heavily as though she had run much further than she had. Oh gosh, was she really going to do this? Chloe stared at her for a second, open-mouthed as if to say something, clamped her jaw shut, and went to turn back around and return to her speed walking. "Chloe!" Marinette exclaimed, exasperated and much louder than she meant to. Chloe froze in place. "What the heck?" Marinette burst out with very little patience left in her voice. Once more receiving no response, she stomped around so that she was standing in front of Chloe, who was apparently clutching her school bag rather tightly, Marinette noted now that she could see her classmates' whitening knuckles. Who knew where the surge of confidence came from, but Marinette found herself whipping out the apology letter and holding it out so Chloe could take a look at it. She said nothing to accompany the grand flourish of wrinkled paper, only violently gesturing in the air next to it with her other hand. Open-palmed and flexed, pointing to it with her whole arm even. This was more important than a one-fingered hand gesture, whatever finger she was to hold up. Chloe stammered, and Marinette could have noted the nervousness in her voice had she been paying attention to anything other than the words themselves. Then Chloe's voice grew small. I wanted to say sorry. A beat. For hurting you and everyone else. Okay, Marinette was going to need a moment to process that. Was she for real? Chloe was honestly 100% apologizing to her. Her? And directly as well? It would have made her feel almost special had it not been for her distrust. The astonished disbelief must have shown on her face, because soon Chloe was stammering something about wanting to right wrongs and that it was okay if everyone hated her, and Marinette found herself at a loss of words. This was different from the other times Chloe went through an apology arc. It had to be. Marinette couldn't forgive her, no, not now, not so suddenly, but she would think about it. This isn't a joke, right? Marinette's throat was dry. What? Chloe seemed disoriented as her nonsensical soliloquy was cut off, and out of breath from the way her chest rose and fell under its designer jacket, a movement which Marinette took more note of than she intended. You're not playing some prank on me? Now it seemed that something was sticking in Chloe's throat, because her voice filled with a sort of deep-seated regret that really dug at Marinette's fight-or-flight response for some reason. No, I swear I'm not. I just needed to change. Change from treating everyone like crap? Yes. Marinette swallowed, feeling lightheaded. Had she really just agreed with that? No sassy response, no nothing? You admit that you treated everyone like crap? Chloe seemed to bite back a swear as she let go of her bag strap, letting it swing crazily from its secure balance on her shoulder as she waved her arms dramatically. Yes! Scratch a moment to process that. Marinette was going to need another whole week. All she could manage was a shake of her head, still disbelieving, and she let her arm drop back to her side. Her other arm, the one that did not end with a hand clutching a cursive apology letter, went to her hip. Chloe, she began, and then sighed. Chloe waited for her to speak, but Marinette only shook her head. I'll see you on Monday. And then she rushed back in the direction she had come from, now letting her own bag swing precariously as she hurried past and away from the girl that had tormented her for years. She didn't look back, but if she had, she would have seen how Chloe turned to look after her, right arm reaching out as if she could stop her. Forlorn, lost, that was the look in her eyes. Not that Marinette saw it. It seemed like Chloe kept trying to talk to her, but Marinette kept avoiding her. In the hallways, in the classroom, and everywhere else they both happened to venture to. Chloe even texted her for the first time ever, but Marinette just left her unread. She didn't know how to respond. She didn't know if she should, so she just didn't. With no recent Akuma attacks, there wasn't even an option to take her mind off the situation, so Marinette was forced to let it revolve inside her head with each passing day. She texted Alia about it too, but got the same response as before. Marinette bit her lip. It didn't feel the same as before. Chloe had never admitted to doing wrong in, well, ever. This felt real, as much as the salty portion of Marinette's mind didn't want to believe it. Another side effect of her enemy learning how to say sorry, she soon realized, was that Adrian started talking to Chloe more at school. It made Marinette purse her lips with, perhaps misplaced at this point, worry, even though she already knew the two were friends. Jealousy would be a good word for the way she felt, even though Adrian was still talking to her just as much. They were friends, of course he would. Still, Marinette had to say the jealousy toned down a bit once she realized, after several classes of watching Chloe and Adrian converse, that Chloe's flirting had basically left their conversations. It seemed like, along with making genuine efforts to stop insulting her classmates, a decision had been made to stop with the near-constant romantic advances. What surprised Marinette the most about that particular edge to the situation was the mixed feelings it gave her. On one hand, she was happy how clearly relieved Adrian seemed to be treated like a friend rather than a potential date, but on the other, she wasn't sure, it just didn't feel right. She couldn't help but wonder what the heck had happened, once again.
By the 4th week of Chloe's escapades and treating people nicely, Alia finally gave in and admitted that this time around, Chloe definitely seemed a lot more serious about it. Sure, Rose still hid behind Julika whenever Chloe saw her do anything even mildly embarrassing, but that was a side effect of being harassed for every little thing she did wrong for a decade. But in reality, the only words Chloe had spoken to her in the past few weeks had been a compliment about her dress, the nice flowy purple one with the gold accents. Marinette hadn't been quite sure what to make of that exchange, honestly. She caught Nino and Adrian talking about the change in Chloe's actions as she walked into the classroom early one Tuesday morning before anyone else had gotten there. "I'm really glad," Adrian was saying. "She's actually acting like the girl I befriended when we were little." "Don't you think she could be lying, though?" Nino sounded skeptical. "Or at least that she's going to go back to acting like she used to." "I hope she won't," Adrian responded, and that was that. When Hawkmoth finally decided to akumatize someone again, dragging Marinette away from her crisis at last, she was half surprised that she wasn't the victim, what with all the wild emotions running rampant inside her. The Akuma battle was not difficult, despite the rather longer break than normal she and Cat Noir had taken between the last victim and then. She didn't even need to use her lucky charm, which didn't happen very often. So, after zipping away from the scene of the battle so that the media wouldn't catch them, the pair of heroes dropped down onto a roof and sat down to relax. Even though she had been sort of preoccupied with the whole Chloe business, she had missed Cat. They were friends after all, and it wasn't like they could hang out in their civilian lives. "You were radiant today, Bugaboo," Cat teased, careful to enunciate each syllable of radiant. "Not even a lucky charm? My, how professional you are." "I could say the same to you," Ladybug teased right back. "Your ring isn't beeping either." He sighed deeply, comically exaggerating a feeling of comfort he undoubtedly felt. "It's as though we never left each other's sides, even though we haven't seen each other in weeks." The playful tone in his voice made the statement humorous, and Ladybug laughed. "It was a nice break," she commented. "I actually got sleep for once." "I know, right?" Cat exclaimed, sitting up straighter as they shared a moment over the side effect of being superheroes. "It's like I'm a normal Paris citizen, like, holy crap, is this how being well-rested feels?" "My eye actually stopped twitching like it does out of pure exhaustion." Ladybug put a hand on her chest dramatically. "I am once again a regular member of society." Cat Noir giggled immaturely. "Are you ready to go back to sleep deprivation, though?" She looked over at him, smirking, already knowing how the statement was going to end. "Because we are back in business, baby," he crowed, and she laughed as he went on. "I am going to be so trashed tomorrow morning, I almost got used to the civilian life." "It's nice to be back," Ladybug smiled, voice softening as she continued. "Nice to have a source of distractions anyway, and I missed you," she admitted. "Aw," Cat Noir smiled back at her. "I missed you too." A comfortable silence entered their space, and Ladybug leaned back against the wall they had plopped down next to, hands wrapped around her knees as she smiled up at the sky. Cat Noir more or less mimicked her, he too leaning back against the wall, though his legs were splayed out in front of him and his arms were resting behind his head. They stayed like that for a moment, Ladybug allowing herself to think back over the battle and the days prior. Then she remembered all the confusion as of late, and a slightly apprehensive frown replaced her reminiscent smile. "Hey, Cat Noir?" she asked out into the quiet of their meeting. "Yeah?" he responded, looking over as she sat up. "Are you okay if I tell you about stuff that's happening in my civilian life?" She looked at him, nervously watching his face as he blinked, surprised but not detrimental. "Not anything super detailed or, invasive, just stuff that's been going on," she added, biting her lip. "Of course." He sat up too, voice smoothly transitioning into a slightly more serious tone. "I'm your friend, I'll always listen." She knew that already, but it was still comforting to hear him say it. Still, it took her some time to actually start talking, opening her mouth to speak before closing it and rethinking her words, then sighing and trying again. This series of actions repeated a few times. Finally, she gave up and just spoke. "So, there's this girl I know." Cat Noir nodded encouragingly, and she smiled weakly before going on. She used to, bully me?" Her voice edged on questioning at the end, reaching an arm up and scratching the back of her head awkwardly. "I don't know, maybe that's hard to believe because I'm Ladybug, for goodness sake, but I guess that's what happened." She pursed her lips. "I sort of fought with her a lot. We didn't get along." She looked over at her partner for more encouragement, desperately wrinkling her nose and frowning, feeling suddenly as if she might cry. Whoa, crying in front of Cat Noir was not on her to-do list for today. His voice was measured and careful. So she used to bully you? Past tense? She nodded, swallowing the sudden urge for tears. Did that change? She took in a shaky breath and nodded again. Yeah, she actually sent me an apology letter. Like, an actual letter? An actual letter. He made that expression he did when he half approved of something, staring off into the distance as his tightly squeezed lips formed an almost pout, though it wasn't exactly negative, bobbing his head with his eyebrows raised. Ladybug sighed. I don't know how to feel about it, Cat. Do you want to forgive her? Ladybug hesitated and then drew in her knees to her chest, hugging them. I don't know. Her voice was small, seemingly too feeble to fit her superhero persona. I feel like I should, but I don't know if it's... She grasped for words. If it's right? Morally? If that makes sense. Cat Nora nodded slowly, then looked over at her, glowing emerald eyes begging for eye contact. This was a side of him she didn't normally get to see, though it wasn't a mutually exclusive rarity being shared. She was also revealing a side of herself that he didn't get to see often. As she stared into his face, he responded carefully. I think I get what you mean. You do? She rested the side of her head on her knees, looking into his eyes. Yeah, he clicked his tongue apprehensively. Something like that happened to someone I know recently. Well, in my civilian life, I mean, someone other than you. She nodded as he went on. She seemed kind of torn, sort of like you are, though she isn't really talking to me about it. They blinked at each other. What I'm trying to say, he reached out and grasped her hand, is that you should do what you think will work for you. If you want to forgive her, go ahead, but if you don't feel ready, give it time. Ladybug thought about it for a moment, thinking over the options, comparing possible outcomes and consequences. She wasn't ready yet, she finally decided, and smiled at him. Thanks. Oh, he smiled too. You're welcome. You're good at this, you know that? She released her knees, though she didn't let go of his hand. I go through this cycle with my dad all the time, he joked. Trust me, I've had plenty of time to mull over the best way to deal with this. She wrinkled her nose. Your dad writes you apology letters? Oh, totally, he laughed boisterously. Sends him right along with the birthday wishes and the milk he keeps trying to go pick up. Despite the dark subject of the joke, Ladybug laughed. Cat Noir really did know how to make her feel better. She was very glad to see him again. They chatted for a while more before settling down into comfortable quiet again, smiling off into the distance. The sky had melted its way into a beautiful array of oranges and golds, like the rolling hills of deciduous trees in autumn. Ladybug loved the colors of the sunset, even if she was part way preoccupied with her thoughts and with Cat Noir's jokes. Eventually they had to go back to their homes, and they bid their goodbyes, sharing a hug before leaping away in opposite directions. She transformed on her balcony. The evening had grown darker and no prying eyes should have been able to catch her, and went inside through the trapdoor. As Tiki gobbled down a macaron, she flopped onto her bed, staring up at the ceiling now that there was no sky to look into. What am I going to do? She murmured, not quite a question and not quite addressing Tiki either, almost talking to herself, had another being not been in the room with her. I think you should give it time. Tiki nodded wisely around her absurdly large snack. You're a nice person, Marinette, but forgiving people is about trust, not apologies. You're right, Marinette groaned, rolling over and rubbing her face. But I still want to forgive her, kind of. Then build trust, the Kwame responded simply, as if it was as easy as that. Chapter 1 complete. Thank you for listening.